What is up, everybody? Welcome into it, the Rocky Top Rewind here on this Sunday evening. I'm Eric Kane, that is Brent Hubbs, and we welcome you to the Rocky Top Rewind here on the Volquest YouTube channel and at volquest.com. Please like and subscribe to this channel, like this video. The goal is always to get 500 likes so we can get in front of more Tennessee fans, and you can always do us a big favor by subscribing to this channel as well. Brad, we got a big show coming up, man. Here in a matter of moments, we're going to speak with VFL Ron Slay. Man, that guy, he's everywhere right now. He's 104.5 The Zone. He's SEC Network. He's calling games for ESPN. But you know he will have a whole lot to say about that Tennessee victory over Duke to get on to the Sweet 16.
Yeah, he's everywhere, but he's happy everywhere right now because his team and if you know Ron and spending time with Ron, he is truly evolved for life. He loves his Tennessee Vols. He loves his basketball, and obviously very proud of this team. And as are all Tennessee fans, as Tennessee advances to the Sweet 16, heading to one of Rick Barnes' most favorite places to play a basketball game at Madison Square Garden in New York, where they will await the winner of tonight's Florida Atlantic and who?
It's either Fairleigh or Farley. I'm not sure yet.
Okay.
If Florida Atlantic wins tonight, we won't have to worry about it.
I'm going with FDU versus Florida Atlantic. How's that? In a bracket that has opened up really well, obviously for not just Tennessee, but we just saw Michigan State knock off to the 2-seed Marquette. Michigan State will take on Kansas State, who knocks off Kentucky, and then Tennessee will be on the other side of that bracket in Madison Square Garden. So should be a ton of fun next weekend, obviously, for Tennessee, a great opportunity, and we'll see how this team bounces back from that. So we're talking a lot of basketball. We'll have Grant Ramey at the bottom of the hour to talk some basketball. We are going to talk some baseball. Disappointing weekend for Tennessee. We'll dive deeper into that coming up in our second segment. Austin Price will join us in the last segment to talk about the start of spring practice that gets underway on tomorrow morning, bright and early. Little quick, kind of a quick walkthrough, refresher, get yourself going. Day one for Tennessee, and then they'll jump into it hot and heavy on Tuesday and go out Thursday and Saturday as well, as Tennessee goes for 15 practices before the orange and white game on April the 15th. So it's here, lots of stuff going on, and should be a ton of fun. And it starts with this basketball team who's got everybody excited. They're still a hard team to figure out, Eric. The better the competition, seemingly the better they play. And Olivier Cumwall was just unbelievable yesterday. I mean, what a performance by him. You look at what he did against Texas was a career high, but to do it in that setting against that team, to dominate them the way they have is pretty significant performance, one that will go down in the history books at Tennessee for a long, long time.
Yeah, no doubt. And it's a beautiful thing about tournament basketball, right? You got Olivier Cumwall, who's a good player, and he's frustrating because he's got so much talent, and a lot of times there's just not consistency there. But when he's on and he has one of those breakout games, it's like on the biggest stage. Remember Tennessee, Texas, late January, he had 27 points and 8 rebounds or whatever, and that was phenomenal. And then here in the round of 32 against a powerful team like Duke, and sure, this might not be the Duke of old, or the flashy three-point shooting offensive swag type team with Coach K, but still a solid team that was playing really, really well, had won 10 straight going into the matchup, and you just have Olivier Cumwall come out and score 23 points in the second half. Just phenomenal, right? And I thought he was kind of the yin to the yang of Santiago Vescovi, who was playing so hard, hustling, grinding, scoring 14 points in the game, but really some big-time shots in the first half for Tennessee to kind of keep them afloat and keep them where they need to be. So I thought it was a phenomenal effort. And that's the beautiful thing about tournament basketball, right? This team is frustrating. This team can beat anybody. It can also lose to anybody, it feels like. However, tournament basketball is about individual matchups. And the more I thought about it, the more I read Rob and Grant's articles going into the game, I thought Tennessee matched up really well with Duke. Wasn't calling for a win, but I thought they matched up well with Duke, and I thought we saw that on Saturday.
Well, and again, what you wondered about that Duke team, and there's nothing, you don't take anything away from what Tennessee accomplished. I mean, Duke had won 10 straight. Everybody felt like Duke had sort of found themselves and had found their defense. And The fact of the matter is Tennessee shoved them around, and Tennessee was the more physical team. Tennessee was the aggressor in a lot of cases and did a lot of great things on the defensive end. Rick Barnes, I put this on the board earlier. When he came storming into Clemson years ago, when he left Providence and left the Big East and came rolling into Clemson, Clemson was they weren't a sleeping giant. They were just a doormat. I mean, they were just a non-respected doormat. And he brought a style of play into that league that league wanted no part of. And there was so much unrest about it. There's the whole Dean Smith, Rick Barnes gets called to the commissioner's house, a la Days of Thunder, if you will. Kind of that scene, which is ironic because Rick Barnes is from Hickory, North Carolina. But they get called to the commissioner's house to knock it off because they're going at each other in every public setting. They can go after each other. Physically, they've gone after each other. And Rick Barnes was playing basketball the way the ACC thought was beneath them, to be honest with you. They thought that brand of basketball was beneath them and beneath who they were. And Rick Barnes was fighting for respect, and he was a different Rick Barnes back then. He was not afraid to mix it up with anybody. And I think that I'm sure in the back of Rick Barnes's mind that probably creeped back in when they were game planning and scouting for Duke, that we can go at them the way we used to when we were at Clemson. And Duke didn't seem to handle it very well. They didn't cry about it post game. I mean, they talked about how physical it was, but I didn't see anything from John Shire talking about, how it was bad for the game, like some of these other national pundits have tried to imply out there. But Tennessee went, and Rick Barnes went Big East on them, is the best way to put it. I know the SEC is a physical league, but he did to an ACC's team what he did to him years ago when he was at Clemson. And Tennessee, as a result, advances to New York to play in the Sweet 16. And you just find a way, right? This is the same team that 48 hours earlier, Eric had Louisiana on the ropes, let them off the hook, let them back in it. That game got really scary. Tennessee pulls it out. And as a result of that, everybody had Tennessee losing by double digits to Duke. And then they come out and they take care of Duke 48 hours later. It's the beauty of this sport and this time of year in the tournament. It's about playing your best at the right time. It's about getting a break here and there. All of those things factor in, and you survive in advance and ride the wave. And right now, Tennessee's on top of the wave, getting ready to go to the Big Apple.
Megan just put up a photo a minute ago of Lively Jr. and Uros Ploff just kind of bumping fists there. And Uros is, we watch Tennessee basketball. We cover Tennessee basketball. We know how Uros plays. We've seen it time in and time out. We know his role in this team. But for those national plaudits that are just tuning in for tournament basketball, they've never kind of seen that. And I thought it was a little unfair, and I thought it was a little annoying, seeing kind of that Tennessee's the dirty team. Tennessee's a dirty team. I wouldn't go that far whatsoever. But Uros did say a nice little comment at post game. You can find over at Volquest.com. It's like, hey, I wasn't going to let a couple of freshmen derail my senior season. I wasn't going to let that happen. And and he said, I don't think Santiago or Olivier Cumwa thought that way either. And so that was kind of the mindset going in there. And I thought it was pretty sweet because Uros, though he didn't score points, though he only got 3 rebounds, he had 4 fouls. I'm not saying he's the smartest player, but he played his role to a T against Duke in a game where Tennessee was considerably just not even being talked about going into it. And a guy that kind of speaks that language is former Tennessee basketball player Ron Slay, and he's a big fan of Uros Ploff, just a big fan of what Rick Barnes is doing with Tennessee right now. Ron, welcome to the Rocky Top Rewind. Thanks so much. And how you feeling, man? The Vols are Sweet 16 bound.
Feeling good. So sweet. How sweet it is. How sweet it is. Oh, long overdue, man. And I think this was the perfect time, man. This is the perfect time. Usually when you come into March Madness and you have it scripted, that's exactly when the script is flipped. So I was feeling great that people were counting them out, looking at them and saying they can't get past the first round. What's going to happen if they ever meet up with Duke? And this is it. This is it. This is what you got to load the bank on.
Ron, when you look at that game, and you've seen this Tennessee team play a bunch, right? I mean, you've seen them in person, you've seen them in the studio, working for the SEC Network. You talk about them daily at 104.5 The Zone on your show. What was it that, as a basketball guy, you liked most about what they did against Duke yesterday?
Man, the attention to detail throughout the entire game. I think that was the most important part. I think going into that game, and knowing that you could count on guys. Like you were able to play 9 players, and everybody was impactful. Even with blunders throughout the game, turnovers here and there, a couple of missed assignments, man, for the most part, you kind of felt that everybody was engaged the entire time. Even when a mistake was made, it wasn't a head drop. It was get right back and stay in tune to what everybody was trying to do. You saw it from the body language on the bench. You saw it from guys that were in the game, picking each other up. And then also just knowing who you were guarding and what you were trying to get to. And then on the offensive end, man, I thought everybody was aggressive. That was the first time in a while that I saw the ball being rotated and guys attacking the rim, not attacking to pass. It was like they were attacking to try to get to their spot to score. If that was cut off, they were able to get it back out to other guys. And, everybody was still engaged trying to get back downhill. There was so many times that this team unselfishly passes up good shots to try to get a great shot. I thought, man, yesterday they were looking for good shots and taking those good shots. And you could live with that, especially when you playing a traditional style of basketball with 2 bigs. Sometimes the best chance you have is putting it on the rim, and let those guys get down there and bang and use that size and length. And they were able to do that.
Ron, we got Wayne saying the boom boom room king is here. Tony saying love Slay, a great VFL. Wayne's asking, remember the Detroit Bad Boys? Maybe that's a reflection of what Tennessee maybe played like at times yesterday. But nonetheless, you brought up those 2 big men for Duke, Filipkowski, the offensive ACC Rookie of the Year, and you have Lively, who's all about defense. One of my favorite stats from the Louisiana game was Jonas Adu was plus 15 on the court, scored 6 points. Uros had an incredible 9 points, huge in that game, obviously. He was minus 15. So the way Tennessee played Jordan Brown against Louisiana was really, really neat. How do you think Tennessee did with Filipkowski, the offensive threat for Duke, on Saturday?
I thought they did great. I thought they did a great job of not letting them play in space, eating up space when, like, as a finesse guy, and I learned later in my career, playing pro ball, when you're able to face up and be able to get to your jumper, you're a threat like no other than you are with your back playing to the basket. Filipkowski is a guy, man, when he faces up, it's a problem. But if you can crowd that space and force him to go one way, then it's a different element brought to his game that he, a lot of people like to be comfortable, especially offensive players. So if you can be comfortable, not get down there and bang, then you can get into your groove. And I don't feel he was able to get into his groove. He was so many bodies being thrown at him. I thought they did a terrific job of guarding him and then making him defend on the other end. It was a lot of time they was posting up and they still wasn't even guys still wasn't getting the ball, but they were posting up, making him be engaged, putting him in the pick and roll action. So it was no rest for him at all. So I thought that was big time, man. And that's the thing. When I'm encouraged by seeing impactful numbers. So you look at Oscar Sheba, you can take him for example. The game he had when he had 8 points and 25 rebounds was way more impactful than a 20 and 20 point performance. You know what I'm saying? Because of the timing of the buckets and Josiah, some of his jumpers, like you take Julian Phillips from the game, like those 2 dunks, momentum wise, were humongous. It was like he had 10 points. So you can go up and down the standings and find guys that have impactful minutes, impactful numbers. And it may not even show in the stat sheet, but it may be that time like Santi in the first half. It was everything you needed. Even if he was forcing shots, like you needed that aggressivity so the other team, so everybody else on the team could pick up and be like, okay, we got somebody that we know is going to get a shot. We know to go to the board. We know the shot's going up. We're not hesitating and trying to pass it while jumping up in the air. The ball's going up on the rim. So put your head down and get to the rim. Down box out, you get an opportunity. So I love the impactful numbers, man, that you saw from Phillips. You got to see and you didn't see from Filipkowski in the second half.
Ron, what do you make of all the discussion about Tennessee from a physicality standpoint? Charles Barkley says it's great that Tennessee did exactly what they had to do. It was the right brand of basketball. They were tremendous in how they played. Other people will say, it was too physical, this, that, and the other. You've seen this league. You know the physicality of this league. You know the game. What do you make of that, or do you think that's just people looking for a topic to talk about right now?
Man, I think it's a little bit of both. I think this league has always been physical, and that's dating back to when I played, and I'm sure before I played. But you look at Florida when they were able to make their run. The reason they were, Mike Miller got the spotlight, but man, Udonis Haslem and Donnell Harvey and Brent Wright and them doing all that dirty work down low, like it was a dirty game down there.
Right.
It gets overshadowed because you got some hell of an athletes, man, that make it look easy, and it's not. The reason Kentucky was good this year when they turned it on is because they got physical. There's no ifs, ands, and buts. Chris Livingston really can't shoot. So what does he end up to do? Be a mismatch at the three and dive to the basket. Jacob Toppin the same way. So when you look at the Vols, man, it's interesting to hear these people talking about it, saying it was a dirty game. And Michigan State been playing like this.
For 20 years, by the way.
Like Rick Pitino says when he comes out and plays, they can't call all the fouls. The referees can't call all the fouls. Man, I still got scars on my nose and everything when we play Louisville. Like, it's a part of the game. So for people to think that this is a dirty style of play, no, it's just matched. And that's the biggest thing I think that the SEC has over other conferences outside of the Big Ten is the appetizer you get with the SEC tournament. That was the closest it's going to be called to March Madness.
Gotcha.
Then when you get into March Madness, there is no, man, they let you play.
Yeah, it's different.
Oh my gosh. And people don't understand. One, the lights. That's a big difference. Two, once you get in there, man, the refs will look at you. They might as well not even have a whistle. I remember that's why it's so important to have veterans ahead of you. Like I can come in and just be wild as a freshman. I didn't have no responsibility. I'd just be a spark plug. Isaiah Victor, CJ Black, Tony Harris, Vince, all of them, we got to play the right way. We need you 20 plus minutes. Me, all I needed was 12 to 18 minutes, man. I'm going to get in here wild as hell. Take charges, run into people, go over the back, all of that, and they're going to let it go. So once you adjust to it and understand that this is a physical style game, and it's called in the NCAA tournament like no other. In the regular season, no conference that you're from, it's a different day and age when you get in that March Madness tournament. And you cannot, one thing you can't do, you can't simulate it in practice. I think Michigan State get a good job. That's why they always do good in tournaments. People that are physical do good in tournaments. It's that simple.
Yeah,
it's simple.
Yeah, they do. Let me ask you this, Ron. You were in this tournament as a freshman in advance to the second weekend. If my math and my years are all correct, you guys got to the second weekend your freshman year. How difficult is it to stay locked in? What is it like playing the first weekend versus the second weekend? You've been in that grind where you play twice a week, and then you get in the SEC tournament where you play back to back. Now all of a sudden you win on Saturday and you don't play again for 4 days. What are the challenges for this basketball team based on your experiences playing on the second weekend of this tournament versus the first weekend?
Man, the first weekend, you're just trying to get through the first game, and you locked in. The second, going into after you get past those first 2 games, going into the second weekend, to me, it became a lot easier because it was less teams to focus on. You were more of a focal point. So you felt like the spotlight was on you. You had been through it. You were experienced. So you went through practice as normal as possible because whatever you did the week before worked. So you're going to try to recreate that same exact thing. I think the most difficult part is when a monkey wrench is thrown in during the game, or you have so our problem comparing it to us, we were ready for North Carolina. Hands down, ain't no question about it. Scouting report was to a T. We knew exactly what they were going to do. The whole problem came in is when Haywood fouled out. So that was the monkey wrench thrown into the game. If Haywood stays in that game and doesn't foul out, we beat them easily, with no question, because they run the offense through them. And like Tennessee now, we got plenty of bodies to throw at them as the big. So we'll live with that. The monkey wrench was when he fouled out and the ball was put in Ed Coder's hand and they just start freelancing. They stopped running offense and he just controlled it. And we were kind of like, oh, whoa, wait a minute. This ain't what we were prepared for. If this was the style we started with, the run and gun style, let's do it. We with it, but that's not what we were with. So I think that caught us a little off guard. And it also, I think, just in the back of our mind, we were ready to play Tulsa. We knew we had Carolina out the way, and we wanted to get them back from when they beat us earlier in that year. So I think the toughest thing once you get past the first round is to stay locked in on that game. You got to stay locked in on that game. You can't look at it until it's 0 seconds on the clock, man. You really don't even need to play. I would advise a team, don't even play the time. All you playing is timeout to timeout to timeout, media timeouts. If you can do that, you win each media timeout, you'll be fine. And that's the way I would play it, man. That clock is dangerous. You got to stay away from that clock. And it's so difficult, man, because you can feel it. You can feel it. That's why you need veterans. I think this is why this is a really good bunch with Tennessee, minus missing Zakai as an emotional lift and defensive net that he is. But, man, you got these guys that are veterans that have been there. So if you need somebody to lean on, you got guys that you can lean on that have been there before. And I think that's an advantage.
Tennessee's going to take on the winner of FAU or FDU. That game's going on right now. FAU's got a quick 6-point lead. But we do have a question for you from Dustin, the Super Chat. Dustin, thank you so much for your contribution. And this is a great question for you, Ron. The game has changed a little bit, man, but are we going to see a resurgence of recruiting the big man, specifically footwork, moves under the hoop, finesse, or is it too far gone toward the opposite direction of the NBA?
Dustin, I'd ask you, who gonna put me on their staff? That's when I think it'll come back. No, I think, man, it's a different day and age, but I think that there is times in the game that you need it. I feel you always need it in transition. And we see it a little bit, and I think Tennessee is really good when we see it, when that first rim runner runs to the front of the rim and starts posting. But you also got to have a guard that's trying to get in there, like Zakai was, that'll have a guy try to come over to help, and that's how you get drop-offs to Eros and Olivier, and they do. But if you don't have a guard that can push the pace, it's kind of null and void. So I think now you have basketball in a positionless state, and it's kind of difficult to tell a guy 6'9", 6'10", hey, man, you got to get down here on the block, take the easy shot, when you see all your peers growing up and everybody's on the perimeter handling the ball. You want to be a part of that. And then, I mean, you look at guys like Brandon Miller. He would have been a guy that would have been on the block, but here he is being able to run the point. The Victor, I don't even know how you say his name, from France, 7'4". Whoever would have thought we would have been in the time and age where he would have been running the 1 through the 4 instead of playing the 5. So it's kind of evolving. That's a little bit of the game, but it is a place for guys like Toby Walker, Grant Williams, to get in there and be able to use your footwork when you're undersized. I think you more so get it with undersized guys now than you do with guys that are 6'10", 6'11", trying to use footwork. And I think it's going to be difficult to go back to that, man, because it's a trickle-down effect. Whatever the NBA adopts, that's kind of what everybody else goes through, college and then on down the grassroots. So it's going to be hard, Dustin, man, to get that back. But I hope so, because I mean the Boom Boom Room will have mothballs in it if we don't get somebody to come down there and go to work.
He is the owner, CEO, captain of the Boom Boom Room. That is Ron Slay. You can catch him on 104.5 The Zone, 3HL, 3 to 6, and ESPN, SEC Network. Dude's everywhere, man. Ron, appreciate it, man. Of course, VFL Ron Slay. Thanks so much.
My time up, man. What happened?
Hey, you can stay on the whole hour if you need it.
I got more questions. We can still roll. We tell some old stories, right?
Hey, I'm always with it, Brent. You know that, man.
We can talk about pizzas in Hawaii. We can talk about all kinds of things.
Yeah, we'll say that for the after party version.
Yeah, we'll save that one for the after party off the air. That's for sure, my man. Hey, I know you're swamped, man. We definitely appreciate it. Congratulations on everything that you've done. You've been fantastic on the network, on the SEC network.
Sleigh rides, baby.
I'm telling you, you keep doing your thing, man. It's great to see you evolve and grow and become national. So keep those suits clean, and we look forward to you on the airways, my man.
Appreciate it. I'm challenging Stack, man. I'm challenging Stackhouse somehow, some way.
There you go.
All right,
thanks, brother. Appreciate you, man.
That is VFL Ron Slay, and kind of out the door here. We'll talk more hoops. Don't worry. We got Grant coming on in about 10 minutes. Wayne says, hey, Vols need another elite guard. Guard play in March is extremely important. Go Vols. Wayne, could not agree more. Thanks so much for your contribution to the show. Appreciate all you guys. We'll come back, talk a little baseball. We'll talk hoops. We'll talk football, spring practice. Go back and listen and watch Deron Slay. That was awesome. Love to get him on again, hopefully before basketball season's over. But before we get into all that, let me tell you about our friends over at MyBookie. March Madness, it's officially begun. Hey, Tennessee's on to the Sweet 16. It's time for you to shoot your shot and score big with a nonstop action over at MyBookie. Whether you're filling out brackets, betting on the eventual national championship winner, or simply looking for a player for game props, MyBookie has got you covered. Getting started with MyBookie is super simple. Visit the website online, make your first deposit, use the promo code Volquest to claim an exclusive deposit bonus. That's promo code Volquest, VOLQUEST, to claim your extra money on top of your initial deposit. With hundreds and thousands of prizes for March Madness and weekly blackjack tournaments, turn your game day into a payday over at MyBookie. Bet anything, anytime, anywhere with MyBookie. More coming up on the Rocky Top Rewind when we return.
Welcome back into the Rocky Top Rewind. I'm Brent Hubbs along with Eric Kane. We talked some Tennessee basketball on Slay. Grant Ramey is going to talk some Tennessee hoops. I tell you what, let's go ahead and talk some Tennessee hoops with Grant Ramey right now. We'll dive into baseball here in just a minute, I promise you, because there's plenty to talk about with baseball because it did not go well this weekend, but it did go well for the Tennessee basketball team. Grant Ramey is somewhere. We're not sure where because travel return from Orlando has been a challenge all day long, I think, for everybody. Grant, just your thoughts a day later, after sleeping on it a bit, if you will, your thoughts on this basketball team being able to put it together the way they did against Duke to put themselves into the Big Apple and what is Rick Barnes' favorite place to play basketball next weekend?
I think it's the NCAA tournament. I think you never know what to expect until you see 40 minutes of whatever's on the floor in front of you. We've talked about it all season long with this team. You don't know what they're going to be night in and night out. Duke had won 10 games in a row. They hadn't lost since early February. They were in a similar position it felt like Tennessee was in a year ago, where Tennessee had won 8 in a row going in. They'd won their conference tournament. They were red hot. Then you run into a team on the second day of the tournament. I think when you're in this tournament, you need to remember what it feels like to get punched in the mouth and know how to punch back. And when you haven't lost in a long time and somebody comes out and kind of puts it on you early and sets the tone physically and in terms of aggression and just getting after it, it's kind of hard to respond. And once you do respond, it's, are you down? How much time's left? You're starting to count possessions. You're starting to worry about your season ending if you don't come up with the right response. So I think Tennessee came out the aggressor, the underdog. I think they love that role. They love being doubted. They love nobody kind of picking them or being in their corner. They want it to be them against the world. It's been that way basically since, February 1st when the calendar flipped over and they went to Florida and lost and started that stretch of whatever it was, 6 out of their last 13 that they had lost, or 7 or whatever it was, going into the NCAA tournament. So they found a way to win 2 games, and that's just the tournament. You never know what you're going to get till you get there and see what the matchups are and just see how it plays out. And they're still alive. They've made an improbable kind of – nobody thought they were going to make a run to the Sweet 16. You knew they had the talent. It was just a question of which team was going to show up.
Great look at this game, and there's a lot of storylines. The physicality, obviously, Santiago Vespi in the first half was phenomenal. Limiting the turnovers, went from 18 against Louisiana to only 9 in the game. That was big, but Olivier Comwall, 23 points in the second half, and he had this type of effort against Texas. Huge game for the Volunteers then. I mean, we shouldn't expect him to score 20 plus every single game, but I mean, he was on another planet the other day.
And it felt very much like that Texas game. And when he's playing at that level, and obviously you're not going to expect him to play consistently at that level, Tennessee can beat anybody in the country. If you can beat Texas, if you can beat Duke, you can play with anybody in the country. To do it in March on that stage, it's one thing to do it at home in front of a sold out crowd, and you got all the momentum behind you and whatever. In January, it's a completely different animal to do it in March in a gym where Tennessee probably had the noise factor in their favor, but I don't think Tennessee fans had the numbers factor in terms of how many people were in that gym wearing Tennessee colors. So to do it on a neutral floor in March with your season on the line against a blue blood, brand name opponent like Duke, and for him to hit the shots that he did to extend the lead or to just match a shot that Duke had on the other end, it felt like anytime Duke had an answer, Olivier came down and hit a huge shot, and it was the threes, it was a dunk, it was that crazy and one where he's falling away from, or he's falling down toward the baseline. When he plays like that, this team is really, really hard to beat.
Yeah, Grant, I mean, I think that's the thing that stands out. And obviously Santi would, in what they did in that run at the end of the first half to not let the game get away from them, should not get lost. But in the second half, Duke had a 5-0 run before right around the first media timeout. After that, they didn't have basically back-to-back buckets. I mean, Tennessee answered everything, which is really something that I wondered whether this team could do it when you look at what happened to them at Auburn to close out the game, Missouri the last 2 minutes. Was it all Olivier? Is that why? Or what was different about this team to where they answered the bell in the closing minutes of a game and did not have one of those late droughts like we saw after Zakai got hurt?
I think Olivier gets the biggest shine, but I think in no way was it only Olivier. Santi hit some huge shots. Until Olivier started to take over in that second half, Santi was the story of that game because he was so in control on both ends. And Eric pointed out, and I should have mentioned it, or I should have touched on it, they had 4 turnovers in the first 8 minutes, and I think they might have had, 5 turnovers over the next 32 minutes. I can't remember what their total was, but it was under 10, and they forced 15 from Duke. But it was Olivier hitting shots. It was Santi hitting shots. It was Santi being in control. I mean, Josiah didn't really play well in the first half, but you look at his stat line at the end of the night, he had 7 points, he had 5 rebounds, he had 4 assists, he had 3 steals. I mean, that's affecting the game every way you can affect it, and he didn't shoot it particularly well. Jonas Sadu blocking shots on the baseline. I mean, that's a Durham, North Carolina guy that never got a Duke offer. He grew up a North Carolina Tar Heel fan. That game meant something different to guys like that. Josiah got recruited to Duke by John Shire. That game means something different to Josiah. So, and these guys just want to keep going. They have this us against the world mentality. When you get to this stage, that the biggest goal you have is just to win a game and get to the next game. And they were able to do that, I think, because of contributions up and down the roster. Rick said it after the game, and he was right in saying that I don't think there's a guy that they put in the game that didn't help them somewhere, form or fashion.
With that being said, and you wrote about this morning at Volquest, how does this team go from being Rocky in Sylvester Stallone in Rocky IV, right, against the Russian, to now they are the favorite? Everybody is not just penciling them in, they're inking them in, regardless of who wins this game that's going on right now. They're inking them into the Elite Eight, whether it's a Tennessee fan, whether it's a media person, whatever. How does this team continue to play with a chip when they're going to become the darling this week, Grant?
It better be hammered into their heads, 24 hours a day until tip-off Thursday against whoever they play. And if they play Florida Atlantic, if that Fairleigh Dickinson 16-seed Cinderella run ends in the second round, which it's insane that they're here to begin with, but that's a 33-win Florida Atlantic team entering the second round. They could be sitting on 34 wins come Thursday. That's a really good basketball team. Number 21 overall in the Ken Palm. They're ranked 25th in the country in the AP poll. So that's not some Conference USA foe. But for Tennessee, it's something that, they can play against Alabama. They can play against Texas. They can play against Kansas. They can play against Duke. They're going to meet they're going to meet the competition when it's those big name programs or those highly ranked programs. And Rod Clark told me in the locker room after the game, we worry more about the Louisianas than the Dukes. And I think we saw that in the first round, the way they kind of struggled to put Louisiana away. And we've seen it all season where Vanderbilt trips them up or Florida trips them up or whoever it is, Missouri. And you also look at Missouri losing to Princeton the way they did. that's a big warning sign, because Tennessee was in that same spot in 2018 when it felt like they were way ahead of schedule. They are a really good story out of the SEC. Nobody expected them to be there. And that 11 seed, Loyola, beats Miami in the first round. And you're thinking suddenly the brackets opened up for us. The 1 seed lost that year as well, Virginia to UMBC. And you're thinking all this stuff. You're looking down the road, and then lo and behold, Loyola sneaks up and plays better than you for 40 minutes and sends you home, just like Princeton whipped Missouri, a really good Missouri team that took it to Tennessee twice this season. And suddenly Missouri's season's over. So Tennessee better stay on edge. That's what they have to do. They have to keep that chip on their shoulder. Nobody's picking you. You're the hunter, not the hunted. Whatever mentality you got to tell this team, because they cannot lose their edge if they want this thing to keep going. It's there for the taking. The bracket has opened up. It's a 3 in Kansas State. It's a 4 in Tennessee. It's a 7 in Michigan State, and it's either a 9 or a 16 in Florida Atlantic or Fairleigh Dickinson. So the bracket's there, but if you don't take advantage of it, you don't take advantage of it.
Grant, how can a guy like Santiago Vescovi, only put up 3 shots? I understand he had some foul trouble against Louisiana, but it just felt like he really wasn't a part of the game plan. He wasn't aggressive or anything. How can you go from that type of performance to where he is so aggressive and he is so critical to everything Tennessee did in the first half against Duke? It just kind of seems like polar opposites.
Probably a little bit of desperation. I think he probably remembers how well Michigan took him out of a game a year ago, and when they ended their season in the second round, and he struggled to do anything. And credit Louisiana. Louisiana was tough on Santi. That first possession, there was a double team, and he went to the floor, and he got up, and it was like, this is what it's going to be the rest of the night. And they keyed on Santiago and dared other people to beat him, and Tennessee had enough for other players to beat them. And there was some frustration there that you saw in front of the Louisiana bench and the technicals and all that stuff that happened. But I think he remembered, what happened in the Louisiana game 2 days prior, what happened in the Michigan game a year ago. Like, he can't be taken out of the game. He's got to be there for this Tennessee team, especially now more than ever with Sakai out. I mean, even last year you had Kennedy Chandler, you had Sakai Ziegler, you had Josiah, you had whoever else to help him, but you still needed him to be the guy. Now it's even more so. He's got to be the guy. He's got to be a guy that finds ways to produce and be effective on both ends of the floor. And you look at his blocks, his steals yesterday, the shots he hit. Like I said, Olivier's the story, but for a long part of that game, Santi was the story based on the way he controlled it. And that's what he's got to do, and find a way to do that same level of desperation in the second weekend.
Can Olivier put it back to back? And I'm not saying he's got to score 27 and 28, 29 points, but can he continue to be that aggressive? I mean, we've seen some games where Grant, he's shot double-digit shots, and we've seen some games where, he shot more 3-point shots than he has, layups, if you will. I guess I'm asking probably the unanswerable question. Is there any consistency to come out of what he did on that stage with the world watching?
I don't know. It is, I think, unanswerable at this point. I think it's wait and see. I think it could be remedied too by other people. I think Josiah's going to shoot it better at some point. I think he can be a lot closer to what he was against Ole Miss in the first round of the SEC tournament than he has been against Missouri the next day, or he was against Louisiana, or he was against Duke on Sunday or Saturday, whatever day it is. I don't know at this point. So I don't think it has to be Olivier. He's got to give you something. He can't disappear. He's not going to score you 27, 28 tonight, whatever, and go off and look like an NBA draft pick. But he's got to give you something consistent, whatever, points, rebounding. He can't just be scoring. He's got to be a little bit of both. But he's got to do something. I think Josiah's got to be a little bit better. I think across the board there can be some other guys that help them a little bit more. But until you see it from Olivier, it's hard to answer, because we just haven't seen it consistently enough through whatever it's been, 35 games or so.
Grant, great coverage. You and Rob did an awesome job down in Orlando. I know you don't have the schedule per se just yet. We know Tennessee's going to play on Thursday, but kind of what's out the door? What's this week look like for the Volunteers?
They'll be up there Tuesday to New York, travel day Tuesday. They'll be at Madison Square Garden Wednesday for press conferences and shoot-arounds. They'll have a practice gym at somewhere in the New York City area where they'll practice and do more stuff. They'll do more shoot-around at the arena. Some point probably Wednesday afternoon. They'll play Thursday evening. I don't know. It'll be an early or late game, probably in the 7 o'clock or 9 o'clock time slot. It'll depend on how these Sunday night games go. They'll release a schedule, I assume, sometime late Sunday night. And then if you win, you stick around and you practice and you shoot around Friday, kind of similar thing. They'll talk and all that stuff. And then you're back at it Saturday. So It's another thing where you want to go to New York Tuesday. If you're Tennessee, you want to be there until Saturday night, as late as you can be there, because that means you probably had a lot of success. So it's as quickly as it feels like you get back in town, you're turning around and going back out of town, which is probably a good thing to get on the road, to be with your teammates, just to get right back into that tournament. 4-team tournament, 2 games, take care of business, see how long you can keep this thing alive.
Best coverage of Tennessee basketball on to the Sweet 16. You can find it from Rob Lewis and Grant Ramey, that guy right there, at Volquest.com. Grant, appreciate it, man. Thanks so much.
Thanks, boys. See y'all.
Appreciate you, man.
All right, we'll continue talking a little Tennessee
That was
hoops.
his travel hat game, by the way, if you were curious. For
So
those,
what?
that was his travel hat game that he
Okay.
had going on there. You know, very low key. Was not anything out of the great. That was not anything out of the really good hat collection. That was the travel hat wear for Grant Ramey. Is he's going to throw some clothes in the wash machine and get them clean and repack and roll back out of town to give everybody on Volquest all of the coverage that you could ever want for this Tennessee basketball team as they get ready to play in the Sweet 16.
Yeah, it was kind of like, where in the world is Waldo? Where in the world is Grant Ramey? Because, his background was kind of all blurry. So who knows where he did. He probably did that on the side of the interstate. I don't know.
He may have. He may have. I know Rob's trying to get home, and he's in an airport somewhere, hoping to catch a flight, but it's getting late. So I don't know if that flight's going to happen or not. A lot of delays going on right now. Travel is not an easy thing, and quick turnaround travel is a really challenging thing.
It's sweeter, though, when you're coming back with a Tennessee win and more games to cover, that's for sure. But we'll come back. We'll talk more Tennessee basketball on the Sweet 16, little Tennessee baseball. Spring football practice begins this week. All that to come right here on the Rocky Top Rewind.
Hub's Eric Kane. While it went well for the Tennessee basketball team to get to New York in the Sweet 16, it was a rough trip to Missouri for the Tennessee baseball team, Eric Kane. This is supposed to be, and look, there's no panic here, right? This season's not a wash. It's not over. They're not going to not make it to, Hoover, and nobody's talking about all that stuff right now. So everybody just slow the brakes there. But this is a series, when you looked at it on the schedule, you thought, go get that series on the road because you know what's coming down the schedule next. And Eric, they just did not play very well. They didn't give themselves a chance to win any of the 3 games in Missouri. Your biggest takeaway on what you saw out of this baseball team getting swept at Missouri this weekend?
Yeah, I was joking with the guys in the thread during game 2 of the doubleheader today. When writing my quick takes following the doubleheader, I mean, it's all negative, and I don't view myself as a negative person, but I mean, there's really not that much to write about other than what went wrong. And I think of the many things that went wrong for Tennessee, I mean, it's got to be starting pitching. I mean, you hang your hat on those 3 horses and Drew Beam and Chase Burns and Chase Dolander when you're trying to figure out that lineup, knowing the lineup is not as deep as it has been in years past, knowing that there's some holes in the bottom third of that order, knowing the aggressiveness of this lineup. They're going to strike out. They're going to leave some guys on base, but you can always hang your hat on those starters. Well, Chase Dolander got served up for 4 in the first inning on Friday night. Chase Burns, some self-inflicting wounds for Drew Beam in his start in the 3rd inning. And then for Chase Burns, he had 10 strikeouts, but still got tagged up a little bit and didn't have much defense behind him. So that was my biggest takeaway. The starting pitching was not crisp. It was not as sharp as it should have been. And let's give Missouri credit. This is not the worst team in the SEC East. Tennessee played like the worst team in the SEC East this weekend for sure. But there's some hitters, there's some veterans in that Missouri lineup. I'm not saying they're going to go postseason play, but they were ready for Tennessee. They controlled the elements to the best of their abilities, and they just whipped Tennessee on a weekend where nothing went right. And as you pointed out, season's not over. Calm down, take a deep breath. But you come back, A&M's a good team this weekend. LSU in 2 weeks. Fayetteville's on that schedule later in April. And, of course, you've got Florida, Vanderbilt. It's not going to get any easier.
No, it doesn't. That all the pressure is on Tennessee coming into next weekend as they host Texas A&M before they go to Baton Rouge. A&M gets one on a road swing to Baton Rouge. They avoid getting swept. But this is not the place you don't want to start 0-3 in SEC play, and that's where Tennessee's got themselves. Is your bigger concern the pitching or the defense behind the pitching? And I ask that because we have seen the effectiveness of these pitchers before, didn't see it this weekend. This is a whole new collection of guys behind them. What concerns you the most, big picture moving forward? Is it the starting pitching getting knocked around? Is it not getting enough help behind them as they did in this weekend, particularly in that last game today? It looked like Tennessee was ready to get on a plane and come home today. I mean, I don't know that Drew Beam gave up I don't think he gave up an earned run today. I'm not sure Tennessee gave up an earned run in that last game all told. What's your bigger concern after watching them this weekend?
No, that's a good point. Yeah, Drew Beam, he gave up, I want to say, 5 runs, none of which were earned. But it's kind of funny. Baseball is funny, right? The first error that kind of led to the downfall was the throwing error by him.
Right.
So it was still self-inflicting. Now, we've seen these pitchers throw too many times to where if it starts getting consecutive starts where they're not looking that great, then maybe there's some worry there. But I'm not worried about these 3 starters. Bullpen wasn't fantastic, but I'm not worried about the bullpen. I'm worried about the defense. We know Tennessee's outfield. It's not the most athletic outfield. It's not the fastest outfield. And the guys they want to play, Kavaris Tears, Dylan Dreiling, those guys can hit, but they're not great in the field. The guys that they feel comfortable playing, and Christian Scott, who got the start in Game 3, and Kyle Booker, they just can't keep going over at the plate. So that's kind of the dilemma there. But you had some bad play in the outfield, and I understand Friday was just atrocious. I mean, there was 30-mile-an-hour winds. It was tough to play anywhere. I get all that, but you have Maui Ahuna that can't catch a simple pop-up in the infield. I mean, that's concerning to me. You have Blake Burke that had his foot off the bag twice today, one of which was an error that led to a run. You had Christian Moore that dropped a simple flip from Maui to Moore at the bag at second base to get out of an inning, just dropped it. I mean, that's the concerning thing right now. And again, I'm not saying the season's over, and I don't want you to believe that either, but I mean, that's alarming when your lineup is not as deep, and obviously you don't have your best stuff on the road in SEC play. So pitching staff, they need to get back in gear, which I'm sure they will, but the defense is the bigger concern for me.
All right, last baseball question before we get Austin in here. And I'm not making excuses. How big of a factor do you think the weather was in this series for this team? Not that they're going to make excuses. We know Tony Vitello's not. How much did it play a factor in for Tennessee, you think?
I mean, Friday, the wind. I mean, it was cold all weekend long, don't get me wrong. But, I mean, Friday, the wind was difficult. But, again, and maybe Missouri, practices in that more, and they kind of know how to play the winds a little bit, if you want to call it that. I would say more than anything, sure, it had something to do with it. But, I mean, that's not why Tennessee lost. That's not why Tennessee was held to 1 hit in Game 3. That's not why Tennessee was held to 3 hits in Game 1. I mean, just anywhere you want to look at it, every single area of Tennessee baseball this weekend was poor. I mean, it really was. So the elements were not ideal. There was snow on the ground to begin the day and the outfield on the warning track. That is not ideal. But Tennessee lost this weekend. Tennessee was swept this weekend simply because they just got whipped in every area. And again, you come back, try to figure it out in the midweek. A&M this weekend, season's not over. You have so much talent on this roster. Starting pitching is still good, but this weekend it just wasn't.
Yep, got to be better with A&M coming to town for sure, as Tennessee's put themselves in a hole. That's an update on Tennessee baseball. Tomorrow morning, the Tennessee football team goes to the practice field to kick off year 3 of spring practice under Tennessee head coach Josh Heupel. Austin Price joins us here to talk about all things Tennessee, but we'll focus on football here to get out the door. AP, this feels different, okay? I mean, and I don't want to make too much out of a spring practice because Lord knows I've covered too many of them in my career to get caught up in a whole bunch of things about spring practice. But this one does feel different than Josh Heupel's first 2 spring practices because it feels like it's going to be more competitive.
100%. And who knows? We're trying to hype up the spring practice bill tomorrow after that sweep by Missouri. You got to get some excitement somewhere. I mean, basketball on to the Sweet 16, baseball with a dud. You'd have to think they'll bounce back next weekend at home. Now, football wise, you're right. There's a lot more depth, and I'm not saying that you're going to count on all these freshmen right out of the gate. No, you're not. But when you get to the third linebacker and the fourth linebacker and the fifth linebacker, a year ago there was a significant drop off. 2 years ago, I've made this joke for 400 times, and I'll make it 401. The three of us were playing as the third, fourth, and fifth linebacker, sometimes as the first and second. So it just feels different. It's more competitive. There's a heck of a lot more depth. There's more competitive depth, and in all positions, really. I mean, you feel like, oh man, they got a lot of guys in the secondary. Now they got to figure who those guys are and what they can do. A lot more guys at linebacker. A lot of excitement at that position. Defensive line, a lot of the same type names, but what does James Pierce look like in year two? What's Josh Josephs look like? What's Caleb Herring look like? Tyree West is another one where you're like, does he take a huge leap? Because I think that ultimately that's where Tennessee takes the leap as a program, is with the defensive side of the ball. And then there's a lot of hype around, Dante Thornton and Squirrel White's trying to build off what he did last year offensively. What can McCallan Castles, the transfer tight end, do? What's Joe Milton look like? What about Nico, right? I mean, everybody wants to talk about Nico. And then, of course, what does Tennessee look like at running back? What's Cam Selden look like? Just a lot more storylines, a lot more able bodies, a lot more depth. And thus, there is more excitement heading in to spring number 3 under Josh Heupel.
Austin, real quick, who are some guys that we're going to be on the lookout for this spring who might be limited or no work, coming off offseason procedures and surgeries?
Well, I mean, we'll start with Tyler Barron. I mean, I'm not sure how much he gets done. Brew McCoy, it will be a no-go, for spring outside of in real work. Ultimately, I still think they're pretty healthy on the whole. I mean, there's going to be a few guys that are out or are limited to individual periods only. But for the most part, this is a pretty healthy football team with just a few exceptions. Jabari Small is one that will not go through spring after having shoulder surgery in the offseason. Remember, they avoided the wrist surgery with Jalen Wright. He'll be good to go. And by all accounts, he is carrying himself as a guy who's ready to take a major leap in his third year in the program. And, we'll see if that comes to fruition. Again, it's easy to say he's carrying himself. He's got to put that in play and actually show he can do it, right? I mean, he showed flashes last year that he can be a real guy. Can he be the guy that Tennessee's looking for at tailback? And then again, these young guys pushing him, what do they do as well?
Yeah, it should be entertaining there for sure. And I think this is a big deal for some receivers. And Tony asked this question down here too. If Bruce, Squirrel, and Thornton start at receiver, how does Ramel Keaton see the field barring injury from someone? I think he's earned playing time, a lot of playing time. How does he get on the field? Keaton has proven himself, Austin. I think they find a way to get him some snaps because you feel comfortable with him. But then what about a Caleb Webb? What about some of these guys who did not play last year, who are in year 2, to go along with a Nathan Laycock? This feels like a big spring for some of those guys not named Bruce, Squirrel, and Thornton. Fair or not fair?
Oh, 100% it's fair. And let's face it, in today's world, Hubs, if you don't play right out of the gate, what's everybody's natural reaction if you're the player? Oh, man, I'm not playing. I got to go somewhere else. And so if those guys can't be a factor and can't get on the field, how much do they get the itch to bolt out of here after this coming year? You're losing Brew. You're losing Ramel Keaton. Dante Thornton with a good year could be a one-and-done type guy. And again, that's, we're getting putting the cart ahead of the horse right now. Dante Thornton's done very little at Oregon, but he shows massive promise, showed huge promise at the end of the year. By that point, he was done in Eugene, ready to move on. What does he do in year 1 here, right? I mean, what kind of impact does he have? I think they get Ramel Keaton on the field because I think Squirrel can be slot, Dante can be slot. So if you're giving one of those guys a break, Ramel's in the game. If Brew has to not play, Ramel's in the game. I think Ramel is a guy who's just a glue guy for you. A teammate, a consummate teammate, consummate pro. But I mean, with those younger receivers, talking about, Chaz Nimrod, Caleb Webb, one does have to wonder, especially with Squirrel, who is in their class making an impact. Do they get antsy if they don't play. That's going to be the question with all players across all positions at every school in America. If you don't play significant time by the time you're done with your sophomore or red shirt freshman year, which means you've been in the program for 2 years, do you sit back and give it a go in year 3, or do you get antsy and bolt? It's going to be interesting to kind of see how that plays out, because I think Josh Heupel, Joey Halsley, they're going to have to find a way to get those guys involved somehow, or they can lose them long term, because I think mentally you can lose them in a hurry if they're not playing this fall. Now, again, this spring, they're going to get plenty of reps. They're going to catch balls. They'll be fine this spring. It's when it gets 2 weeks into fall camp and everything starts getting pared down, when we get 2 weeks into the season and it's really pared down, where are those players at? Are they a factor, or are they watching?
Austin, it's funny. Like Tennessee is trying to replace who should have been a Heisman finalist in Hendon Hooker, quarterback.
Yeah.
And it's like, I'm not even worried about the quarterback position, because we kind of know who Joe is. We saw him the last 2 games of the season. He's a veteran. This will be his 6th season in college and all that. And, the Nico factor, everybody wants to watch him. But is it wrong for me not even worry about that? One of my main focuses this spring is the offensive line. Kind of on that note with those receivers, it's a big spring for those sophomore offensive linemen, kind of figuring out who they are, where are they. Tennessee's trying to replace 2 starters on the offensive line. You're welcome them in. Keurig, is he a guard, a tackle? John Campbell, is he right side, left side? A lot of my focus is on the offensive line here in this spring practice, and not even really on a new quarterback who Tennessee's got to replace a lot of production from Hendon Hooker.
You're not wrong, but I wouldn't call you right either, because I don't think you can just go, oh, Joe's going to be fine. Like, he had a month to prepare for Clemson. He played really well. I wouldn't say it was all world. But how much can he grow this offseason? Hendon's not here anymore. So now Joe's the unquestioned leader in that room. Tennessee had that really nice benefit last year of having veteran Hendon Hooker backed up by veteran Joe Milton, and then a freshman in Taven Jackson, and then, go down from there, Gaston Moore. This coming year, you've got veteran, Joe Milton backed up by Gaston Moore, and then Nico, who again comes in with all the weight of the world on him because of the NIL stuff and the 5-star status and #1 player in the country by on 3 and all this. I think Nico can handle it. I think he's got big, broad shoulders. My point though is I just don't think that you can go, Tennessee's good at quarterback. I think there's unlimited potential in that room, but I don't think you can just definitely say everything's hunky-dory. You don't have to worry about it. It's a turnkey operation. We're good. But where you're totally correct is the offensive line is exactly where I'm looking this spring, because you're right. They've got to figure out how to replace Darnell Wright. And good luck. Good luck to Glenn Ellerby, because while I think John Campbell is fine, he's not Darnell Wright in my opinion. And so how much growth can he get out of J.J. Crawford? How much growth can he get out of Gerald Mincy? What's John Campbell look like? How do they play him? Is Campbell solely left? If that's the case, then they're going to shift those other guys to the right. None of them have really played a whole lot of right tackle. And then I think they'll be fine guard to guard. I think there's more depth there. But it's going to be interesting to see who kind of fills into that spot where Jerome Carvin exits. And then who's the backup center? They've had this great luxury of, if Cooper goes down, they just move Jerome inside. And that was a turnkey operation for that position. They no longer have that. And so, I think this offensive line stuff, it's going to be really fascinating to watch it play out this spring, into the summer, and into fall.
All right, last question here before we get out the door. Dustin's got one for us here. Thanks for the super chat, Dustin. Do we continue to see more under center and short yardage situations like we did in year 2 with Hendon Hooker? It seemed to be productive in addition to some of the other sneaky formations that they run. Do you think they stay under center with a big Joe Milton in short yardage, AP?
I think there's a real chance that they do. And let's face it, Joe's a big body. The key to those quarterback, sneaks, though, is being able to get low. Can Joe get that low? He's just so big. That's, again, something that I think you have to see to kind of understand it. Hendon was really good at it. But, again, now that, you don't have it's not against the rules to come in there and, for Jalen Wright to come in there and push Joe Milton, from behind. I think you still see a lot of under center stuff, especially in short yardage. And I think Tennessee would be wise to do so. That was part of their trademark a year ago, was the ability to pick up short yardage, which in year one, it was not their trademark. They really kind of perfected that last year. Can they have similar success? I guess time will tell.
Yeah, offset eye. One of the things that worked short yardage was Darnell Wright and Jerome Carvin to run behind, which were two veterans there. But you've got the Jalen Hurts effect, Eric. I mean, everybody's looking at what the Eagles do in short yardage stuff. It's a copycat world. A lot of people are going to look at that and say, "Hey, can I do things? Can I incorporate some of that stuff into my world?" So I don't think the under center stuff will be every time, but I don't think they'll completely go away with it, particularly when you have a legendary head coach say after a game, our guys didn't know what that was when Tennessee lined up in an offset eye formation. So I think it's only going to continue there, Eric.
Yeah, no doubt. But then another question, and we won't have the answer to this until next football season because we won't see any of it in spring practice or fall camp. If they go offset eye, who's going to be the running back, right? Is it going to be a tight end?
Out there. You're right.
Yeah, exactly. So a lot of questions, and hopefully we get some answers. We get a good idea about some of those in spring practice, and all that starts tomorrow for Tennessee football. A lot going on right now. Some scores of interest out the door. In pressing matters, USA is leading Cuba 7-1 in the semifinals of the World Baseball Classic. But more importantly, it is FAU leading FDU 32-25 at halftime. The winner will take on Tennessee in the Sweet 16.
Hey, Hubbard.
Yeah.
That's warm in the morning.
Yes, I will. Trust me. There's a good chance I will have a toboggan and multiple layers on for our 2 periods of early practice viewing as Tennessee hits the practice field. I bet they're inside in the morning. How about that? I bet they're inside.
I'm for
they're inside.
I'm up for that.
I'm all in for the inside in the morning. I'm taking a chance on. I'm saying they're inside. We don't have to worry about it tomorrow, which means you can wear a Peter Millar something tomorrow indoors. AP. Life's good for you.
Hubs, if I'm wearing it, it's likely Peter Millar.
Be sure to like this button, or be sure to hit the like button here on this video. Let's get in front of more Tennessee fans. Please subscribe to the Volquest channel on YouTube. And as always, subscribe to us over at Volquest.com in the General's Quarters. Great deal, $29.99. And you can be a part of the Volquest family. A lot going on right now, including Tennessee in the Sweet 16. No better time to be a member of the site. For Grant Ramey, Ron Slay, Austin Price, Brent Hubbs, I'm Eric Kane. Appreciate you guys, as always, for tuning in to the Rocky Top Rewind.